So, welcome everybody. Lovely to see you all. Some people we know, some people we don't know. So, welcome here if you're here for the first time. So, my name's Zena Me, and I run an organisation called Eldership for Leaders. We have our own elders business school. Contrary to belief, you can attend any of our sessions, even if you haven't got grey hair and you're not bald. So it's not about being old, people, eldership. It's a stage and a place in our life journey and in our communities. But it's been lost to olders rather than elders. So we welcome any age to join us, actually. There is not an age limit that you have to be to join the eldership community. It's you just got to be interested in culture making and the role of elders in that culture making. So that's what we're all about. And that's about our own personal journey into eldership in terms of that stage of life, that stage of consciousness. But it's also about working in organizations or working with communities and if you like bringing that eldership energy into the culture making, which I think we can probably all accept is completely and utterly missing in our world right now. So I've always been on a quest to really bring this into being. So today we're doing this is our second live podcast, and I wanted to do this so that you had an opportunity to talk to whoever I'm doing that podcast with. I know there's lots of podcasts out there, but I think that it's nice to have a live audience. A shame we can't be in person, but this is the nearest thing to be able to do in that. So, I think it's nice for people to be able to engage with each other as well, and to ask questions or bring your expertise. This is not hierarchy. There is no hierarchy in eldership. Just because I might be older than you or whatever than you, then that doesn't make me bigger than you. And so everybody has something to contribute to this conversation, and we're interested in finding out what that might be and what that might look like for you. So today in our live podcast, we've got the amazing Garry Turner. And me and Garry introduced me to podcast. My first ever podcast was with Garry talking about eldership quite a few years ago now. And so he's a very curious soul, but he's also a very courageous soul as well. So we got on like a house on fire, and we've been good buddies ever since, and have kind of followed each other's work and where it's going. And the movement that we're really on in our community has been going for a couple of years now. But the movement we're on is how do we get this? How do we start these conversations in organisations about eldership? Because on the rare occasion you might have an opportunity to talk about eldership, you might get a bit of a pushback that kind of goes, I'm not old enough to talk about eldership. I don't want to be identified as an old person. And like, is that religious? So you get all this stuff that kind of comes at you. And so we're on a bit of a quest now to say, how do we have these conversations about how do we can make eldership relevant to organizations? So this is why I've asked Garry to kind of come and talk with us today about his perspective on it. And there is another video with Garry that you don't have to have seen it, but you might want to go back over it where we started this deep dive, and that was just me and Garry before we're doing this live. How we structure this is that we have me and Garry start the conversation off. I've asked Garry particularly today to bring one of his models. As you can see, this is one of my models. And in our eldership community, we love models. If you don't love models, you won't enjoy our community. We absolutely love models. So you can just make up your own model, people. It doesn't have to be heavily researched in PhD and degrees. It's whatever your model might be, you're welcome to bring it. Garry's got a model. So I've asked Garry to come and talk to us about his model today because it's fascinating. And my philosophy on models is it's a way of being able to communicate that, if you like, your vision for something, your way of looking at something from your life experience, from your ancestral background even. It's like it's the way you look at the world maybe, and it can change tomorrow. You can have a different model. It doesn't really matter, but sometimes it helps to communicate with other people and connect with other people about kind of your philosophy and your point of view, which is very important in eldership. So Gary's got his model. I'm gonna let you into a bit of a secret. Gary got his model before I did, truthfully. So actually, the part of kind of creating my model was like talking to Gary along the way. So I give him huge credit for that. But Gary's got an excellent model as well. Um, a little bit about I'll let Gary introduce himself to you, but yeah, in fact, I'm not going to say any more about Gary. I'm going to pass over to Gary, let him introduce himself a little bit more and tell you what he wants to say about him before we start the conversation. And then we'll come to you. And, no pressure to get on camera and have a conversation with us. But, we would love you to ask any questions or any thoughts or any perspectives on it would be welcome. Over to you, Gary.
Well, what a gracious introduction. Thank you, Zaina. It's really, really lovely to see some old faces and some new ones. Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are on this beautiful orb. So yeah, very briefly myself. So I call myself a recovering corporate employee first and foremost. I still work within a corporate space full time, and I'm also building something on the side, which is what we're here talking about today. Most importantly about me, so I'm a doggy daddy to a wonderful cockapoo called Winnie, husband, stepdad to 3 kids, and a very concerned grandparent around the state of the world, externally, but also within organizational settings. And that's why I'm really, really passionate to learn with all of you today and to share different perspectives, because to my core, I know that the world is generative. We are generative beings, but the systems that we're all part of don't allow that to come through, not easily anyway. So that's part of my passion for being here with Zaina and all of you today, is to co-create that generative way forward. Thanks, Zaina.
Thanks, Gary. So today we're talking about culture making, which which is why we started off. Although for people who are watching this podcast afterwards, you've not had the pleasure of the music, which was Talking Heads, The Road to Nowhere. But that's what we called the podcast because it feels like that for most of us. I think working in organisations or even on the planet, even now, like going, oh my God, where are we going? So I thought that was quite an interesting piece of music to use. So a couple of quotes I want to just start off with. If you've never read the book Community and Belonging by Peter Block, I highly recommend it. And these are quotes from him. And he talks about the process of culture making is for people who want to play their part in creating organizations that work for all, and who have the faith and the energy to create such a place. So the process of culture making is for people who want to play their part in creating organizations that work for all and who have the faith and energy to create such a place. For anybody who's been working in organizations, it's not an easy thing to work in, I don't think, in this day and age. And then the other thing that he spoke about is this: an alternative future needs the investment of citizens. Leaders, and I'm going to say elders, that are not in top positions. So when we're talking about elders, we're not talking about people who are in senior positions in organizations. They, if you like, they're like your cultural architects of a organizing system, if that makes a human organizing system. They're those people that we look to kind of connect in and feel a sense of belonging to the culture. So they're not necessarily in top positions, but they're people who are willing to pay the economic and emotional price that creating something really new requires. So there's a nod there to sacrifices that have to be made in order to create something really new. So that's kind of the challenge of that today. So what I'd like Garry to do is tell us a little bit, Garry, about kind of how you came to your awareness about what's going on culturally in organizations. At what point did you suddenly kind of zoom out of organizational and corporate culture and start to look at it through a different lens?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. So for me, it's been the last probably 15 years. So I'm 49 now, 50 next year, just from an age point of view. And for those first 35 years, I was 100% on the conditioned, you know, the track of, get your job, get the bills, get the next promotion, get the next salary, like very myopic. Life was good. I was making good money, good people around me in my world. Everything looks good. But what I had was complete systemic blinkers, is what I call them. So I didn't actually see the world as interconnected. I didn't understand that the products that I use in the UK have harm built into them at every step of the supply chain around the world. So I just gradually, over the last decade, with coaching, with support, have started to join those dots in a more meaningful way so that I can make different decisions going forward. However, along that bumpy path has been having to deal with my own trauma, which was being beaten up as a kid repeatedly for 2 years, age 12, 13. And as a man in particular, growing up in the West, you don't talk about that stuff, Zaina, do you? You don't talk about feelings. You don't talk about pain. Absolutely not. So I stuffed it down. Again, so almost like a high functioning alcoholic of behavior, really. So life worked. I say, done well. Nothing on the outside was a problem at all. But internally, I was literally in absolute pieces. And it took me until I think it was 2013. I had a mental health episode at the workplace. Just jumped in the car. For those that are based in the UK, I just drove down the M3, took myself 3 hours down the road, down to Bournemouth, and just literally spent 2 days staring at the sea. Like that just came from nowhere. It's just a bodily reaction to the trauma and the frustration I was feeling. And something over those 2 days popped. And what popped was I realized in that over those 2 days that I was spiritually bankrupt. So I had everything on the outside that I've been conditioned to tell me matters. Internally, I was literally a hollow vessel. And that started me on this really curious journey of like, oh God, like what would it feel like to feel fulfilled whilst having impact rather than just conforming to the status quo, which I've been told is what gets rewarded. So, I tell you what to do. I deliver on it. I get paid. Thanks very much. Now, that very extractive traditional business model. And what I'm really excited about, what you're doing with the eldership community, and I look forward to hearing other people's perspective on this call, but I can really feel there's a calling to all of us right now to show up fully in our power with love, with connectedness, and with bravery, because the system is absolutely creaking and it knows change is coming, but it's got enough power to keep us small and to keep us afraid to speak up. So I can feel that real tension at the moment within organizational structures and also in society. And I'm really grateful to be here with you all today to explore what navigating that tension might look and feel like.
Great, thanks, Garry. So and what Gary's describing there is a moment, and you may have experienced this consciously or you may not, but often what happens is on that kind of road to eldership, we hit something that we describe as the wasteland. It's almost like, oh wow, suddenly there's this moment of what am I doing? Why am I here? What am I doing this for? There's almost like a sense that maybe what we're doing feels somehow meaningless now, even though we may have been kind of fed the story as we often, and certainly in our culture, we're very much led to believe that certain things make us happy. And then suddenly we get to a point where we go, well, we've got those things, but hey, we don't necessarily feel how we expected to feel. So there's this, what we call like a disenfranchised grief that happens. And that could show up as kind of a moment of like break. Sometimes might call it breakdown, but it's also a breakthrough. Hopefully it's a breakthrough of kind of going, okay, now I need to look at this because maybe I've been deflected away or distracted by doing other things as well. So Garry, you came up with this model. How old is this model in terms of, and this is a model through your own kind of inner research, really, isn't it? More than I know you've been on all over the place researching all sorts of things. I mean, just as a tip, if you're following Garry, you'll learn words you've never heard before. So I often have to go and have a look and see what that word means because you're amazing at being able to bring words to describe things that I thought, oh, that
That's
is a thing.
that's
That is a
that's
thing.
scary.
So, at what point did the model emerge for you then? At what point on your journey did the model emerge?
Do you want to share it for now, or just talk about it for now, Zaina? What's best for you?
Well, can you tell us how
Yeah,
it?
just the how before.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's really interesting for this? So yeah, as you say, it's very much so this model. I like the way you set up today's conversation, really, which is I call it like a heuristic. It's like a sort of it's a view on the world that I'm looking through rather than something fixed that someone else could pick up and go, right, I can now copy Garry, or it's not about that, as you sort of described earlier. It's more how I see the world. Now, full disclosure, the model that I've created is, and what I call it the embodied human. And in essence, I took a lot, actually, and I've got to be honest, from, I don't know if anyone's read the book Exponential Organizations by Salim Ismail. But basically, it's a really interesting book that came out about 15 years ago. So Salim Ismail was one of, I think he was the chief technical officer of Yahoo, or one of the big unicorn tech companies back in the day when we didn't realize quite how harmful they would become, and how quickly. This guy, really, really interesting, wrote a book called Exponential Organizations. And why it was the seed, Zaina, for my model, it never quite felt right, but I saw a lot of value in what he had created. So what it is, in essence, is a mixture of individual and collective. It's a mixture of sourcing input from the crowd, or from crowdsourcing ideas from your community, plus you have your own ideas. So in principle, what they created with the exponential organizations was actually from a potentiality point of view, was really, really potent, right? So like I say, it's really blending the individual and collective. It's blending collective ideas, individual ideas, etc. But what was missing for me was the humanity of the model. So I was really curious about it. I was like, is there a way of humanizing this very clever model that's been built and clearly supported unicorns, billion-dollar turnover companies? And then I was like, there's nothing in there about humanity. There's nothing about listening. There's nothing about connection. Something's missing for me. And actually, as we look at the world today and how big, some of these companies are, we're talking $1 trillion turnover organizations. Should any organization become that big? Question for debate. But what's interesting for me was I took what I saw as the best bits of that, which includes things like the community and the crowd part, which I think is really, really potent. Quite often within an organizational setting, we're very linear, we're very competitive outside of our four walls. I'm sure this resonates with people on the call. Don't talk to them, they're a competitor. Don't share information, they're a competitor. Whereas what he's inviting with this model is actually, we are better by cross-fertilizing, by sharing knowledge, by co-creation. And there was other things, accountability, which is a really important topic, of course, in all domains of life. So the model that, in essence, to wrap up my intro, this model that he created and his partners to help grow an exponential technical organization, I believe we're on the cusp, and that's part of what this fracture is for me in my interpretation of life. This fracture is the invitation. It's the invitation to come in fully embodied, to show up fully in our values, in our connectedness, in our love, in our vulnerability, in our trust of ourselves and one another, before we layer up all of those conditioned colonial narratives that we've all been brought up on over the last sort of 600 years. So the model was inspired by exponential organizations and humanized by me, I would say, in summary.
Lovely. So let's see the model then. It's like show and tell us.
That's a look out for everyone's faces. It's like, oh god, everyone drops off in about 2 minutes. No, I'll share it with you now. Hopefully, do let me know that it's coming through.
Yeah, it might take a while. Oh, great. Yeah, can everybody see that? Yeah, fab. So the embodied human.
And I think, if I may, Zaina, the thing I'd really point people towards, because this is something I did not experience in my own life. So again, this is very much Garry's view of the world based on an iteration of this exponential model. But this is the bit that actually makes me emotional whenever I look at this and give my time to sit in the model, is these intersections. So experimentation, awareness, practice. Those three things are not prized in Western corporations today, now in November 2025. Those three things are weak, they're soft, they're a waste of time. Don't do it. So that's my invitation when I look through this particular model, and I love people's feedback on it. It really is that the reason I call it embodied, and I'm called, as a white guy in the West, I'm not going to try and co-opt any indigenous language or anything like that in this conversation. But I'm feeling right now in my body as I talk to you and I connect with you all today, I feel fully embodied. And that's been the journey of the last decade.
Wow. So I'm thinking as well of something recently. I was talking about to somebody in my kind of in a more systemic field, and I was talking about experimentation, and maybe put when you put something out there new, to actually be honest about that and say this is new, and and so therefore obviously there's a vulnerability about it, but there's also about like, this is not the finished article, so I'm not going to bullshit you that this is it, to mean that it's tried and tested. But I want you to come along the journey with me, to mean, and be kind of experimental. And it was fascinating. I thought I was talking to a fellow systemic person who would have had the same view as me. And they turned around and said, "Oh no, you're showing a lack of confidence, therefore, in what actually you're doing. They don't need to know that. You just go out there and you basically you sell it." And it was like, "Oh wow, that's fascinating." So even when we think you're dealing with sometimes conscious people or people who are kind of thinking systemically, that part of us that still believes that we can't be honest about experimenting, about being open, and that it may be not the finished product, and actually getting help from others to create it. Do you know what I mean? Rather than doing it on your own. That's the bit that strikes me from your model. That's very clear that actually that trying new for the first time or stepping into the unknown.
What's really interesting, thank you for that sort of mirroring that back, Zaina, because what makes me emotional about being with you all, and thank you all, by the way, for witnessing, because you're all doing that with me today, and I really do appreciate that. This for me is really emotional because it's everything that I do not have in my corporate role. Everything. So this is literally, you could look at this as a reflection of who I could become if the organizational leadership and the culture of that organization was open enough to accept that offer to come into the system. So then you look at sort of things like the Gallup Global Stats, the state of the work report from the Gallup organization. This year was 21% fully engaged across organizations globally. And the way I'm a commercial guy, right? I'm a sales guy. So I always speak in numbers as well as humanity. So that's 79 pence in every pound of someone's salary is wasted or ineffective. And that's okay, apparently, according to the system. So it's a really interesting interplay. And so I just wanted to sort of be vulnerable myself and just say, like, this is not just a window or an idea. This is literally who I'm here to become, basically. And I'm modeling a lot of it. I'm practicing a lot of it, but I'm far from the polished article with all of this.
So your longing, for you is for that embodied human, for actually to be all of you and bring your whole. I mean, I hate the saying, bring your whole self to work, but in essence, it's about authenticity and being you, rather than the adapted you for the organizations.
100%. And I'm able to be, and I would say I am more often, most of the time in my life. And I think that's the gift that I'm trying to offer myself and others through this model, is to see ourselves as worthy of being a whole human. Because every bit of the systems that we're part of, whether we're honest about it or not, is telling us we are atomized. We are only good if we are doing this particular thing for mum, dad, nan, work, boss, etc. So, reclaiming a fully embodied means to not allow any part of our systems to atomize us. And that's the sort of activist part of this model, is the reminder that we are fully embodied. Always. It's just a case of how much of that we're giving away to the systems that we're part of.
Mm. And do you have a sense, Garry, of what the resistance is to embodiment?
So I can only speak from my context, which is so a bit of flavour for everyone on the call. So I still work within one of the most challenging industries on the planet, which is chemicals. So it's part of the fossil fuel supply chain, necessary for many ways. But how that's led, it still brings with it a very patriarchal, very colonial mindset, which is one of power over. It's one of dominance. It's one of invulnerability to hear other people's ideas. So you've almost got, and I don't know about people's journeys, you know, I've got a very narrow context. One thing I can see for sure is fear. So the overarching emotion that a lot of these leaders, certainly within my context, don't allow themselves to feel. And I emphasize the word feel. Is, and by the way, I keep zooming in and out. I've got an AI camera, which is really weird. So when I do that, it pops in and out, which is quite off-putting. Bloody technology. So what see? But there's a real invitation. You know, there's a real invitation and a reminder for me, and that's what I hope this offers to people. Again, I'd love people to pull it apart, challenge it. You know, how does it resonate? How does it not resonate? But the invitation is to remember we are already whole. We are already embodied. The journey for me then is piecing together, where did I get rid of it, or who did I give it away to, and why? And I think that sort of looking backwards and going, I was bullied as a kid, or I've done that, or actually I fell out with that person. I never actually solved that argument that I had. You know, it's sort of like it's almost like personal reparations. We talk a lot about reparations to the global south, which is absolutely right. There's almost something in this moment, and I've never said this before, people. There's almost like a personal journey of reparations to oneself. And I think that's partly what this is all about, is, you know, what's the repair within my context, for me personally, for the systems I'm part of, my family, my local community. You know, where do I need repair for me, and how does that ripple out positively to the different systems I'm part of?
That's amazing, Garry, and you know, very courageous to say as well, because I think again it's about being vulnerable and knowing that there are those places within us that need to be healed, if you like, as well. And in the eldership space, it's not just the stuff that maybe has happened to us personally, but also our ancestral healing as well, because we're looking back at who we are and what we're carrying from the ancestors as well, and I think as well, not just from our ancestral heritage as a family, so the families we've come from, but also the you know, the countries that we've come from, the place on the planet we've come from as well. There's a lot of reparation there that needs to be done as well, and I know you speak a lot about that in your work, don't you?
Yeah, it's quite interesting, actually, if I may share that, because a big step change, and it's not the sort of word you'd hear probably very often on one of these calls yet in the West. But I have, for the last 5.5 years, been on a personal decolonization journey with a guide based in the Philippines. What that means is, in simple language, is being honest and truthful about the systemic and ongoing harms that come from just the way the world is organized. Not my fault, not anybody on this call's fault, but it's an awareness that, for me to have 6 times, and I use this example a lot, I get 6 times death in service benefit at my employer. Something on someone's got to pay for that. So I look at it as 6 other lives somewhere else are worthy of disposal in order for me to have that 6 times benefit. And when you start to look at the trade-off between things that we have in the West versus what others clearly don't have in different parts of the world, it just, you know, trying to park, we feel shame, we feel guilt, that's great, we need to process it and go through that. But it's more about this, just that the embodied part for me is not pushing anything away, Zaina. You know, we learn something, it hurts, it's painful, it's frustrating, it makes you angry. And I am all of those things quite often, believe it or not. It's also that's the journey. That's the embodied part for me, is the ability to not push any of that away and feel it, but not also hold on to it as a toxin and try and, which I do, one of my patterns is falling into saviorism. So I want to, you know, if I get angry, I want to go out and solve the world. So I'll go and start trying to save everything, right? That's not my role. Yeah, and that's a classic example of the mind being colonized basically over the last sort of 500 years. So I hope that's not too deep, too fast. I'm meeting a number of new people today, but just being very honest and open and vulnerable, that's been a really important part of my journey, because that model that you can see is heavily informed by that ability to hold the polarity, to hold the yes and not get pulled down the either or, which is what the system wants us to do.
Mm. So let's do you want to stop sharing the model?
Absolutely.
If we need it, and let's go to our lovely audience today and say any questions, thoughts, reflections that you want to bring to either myself or Garry or to both of us. And there is no pressure.
Yeah, I'll happily start. I've got a couple of questions. Good to see you, Garry, as always.
Likewise, my friend.
Something you said earlier, well, a little bit before, about the embodied part of it, and the question was, where did I give it away? I understand that. My sense of it is that we've always got it. It's always within us. We are enough, and all of the things you said as well. So my sense is that we are either distracted, or more probably prevalent is being programmed on top of what we already have and know. And so the journey for me is about remembering and letting go of subtraction, etc., which is interesting in the business you're in, which is in extraction. We're talking about subtraction. And the second one was in the model, which I like, by the way. Again, there's two things. One is, that's your lens, you're looking through the world. It'd be interesting to see the world as you see it beyond that, almost like in grey, and you're bringing the colour. So what is it I'm seeing in the world beyond, through my lens, as an idea? And then the second is where you've got I think it was me, I can't remember, the three little circles at the top. In the top one, there was the me, other, and systems. And I'm wondering whether you're missing your model, obviously, the world stroke nature, and or society. And they may fit into those two things, but perhaps to make them more explicit, because I often talk about my connection with self, my connection with others, but also the connection with nature, the bigger picture. Yeah, that's my thought so far. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you for offering those, Colin. It's really, really beautiful. And something that's come up for me straight away is the importance of language as well. You know, what you've seen and what you're reading or hearing versus what I might think I'm saying, and how do we have that tension between what we think we're each saying and what, you know. Colin is an incredible listener for anyone else that's on the call, and yeah, and Zaina, I was curious about, you know, from your work, where is that space? How often is that space exist within an organisation where we truly listen to each other, i.e., we say, let's take half an hour. It feels like there's something not going on here, or there's something that needs to be sort of surfaced. That almost never happens. You ask for space within an organisation for half an hour to say, I just want to talk about this thing that feels off. Like, don't worry about it, just get on, next thing. Come on, we've got another project to do. So yeah, thank you for those feedback and reflections, Colin. Really helpful.
And you're absolutely right, Garry. There is no space, and you know, I think this is the whole point. We've stopped culture making. So, because in culture making, what we're doing is we're talking to each other. We're in dialogue. We're spending time together. We're learning about each other. We're learning about ourselves. We're learning about ourselves with each other. And it's like that doesn't happen anymore in organizations. And actually, it used to. So, you know, my background is in originally when I first started was in learning and development at the police, and they used to spend. So I'm going back to the early 90s now. They used to spend over £25,000 per new recruit on the training in the first 2 years.
Wow.
And that was then. And I was listening to an amazing podcast, which I'll send a link for all of you to link into, from Amol Rajan on Radio 4. And he was talking to a woman who's written a book called The Inheritocracy, which is about what's happening, the social changes and how it affects the workplace, if anybody's not read her work. But she says most companies now spend around 2% of their budget on L&D. It's like, it's gone, hasn't it? You know, I mean, I'm a long way out of organizations. I've been self-employed for 30 years now. And it's been, you know, and I certainly remember, and I can make a distinction between pre-2008 and the crash and post. And it's almost like it doesn't seem to have got back to what it was. And this lady was saying they no longer train or invest in their workers. They've slapped the bill for learning onto people through degrees. But they used to learn at work. That's the whole point. And this was part, I think I think people underestimated how much kind of the training and development that went on, you know, either in classroom work or on the job with kind of more experienced workers, was all part of the culture making, and it stopped. It stopped. So, and this is what she was saying, you were an apprentice, you learned your craft. Just trying to find what else she was saying here. And she said the fundamental philosophy of working hard and getting the rewards is fundamental to a democracy. And working hard and not well educated is what's being it's almost like it's the education that's being rewarded rather than working hard. And she says we're going to have to spend the next 30 years redefining what wisdom and intelligence and learning is. So, because we've lost it, we've lost our understanding of what that is. She said the trick in AI is for companies to start training the workforce and not expect those ready-made people with amazing CVs to turn up as perfect workers at their doorstep. So it's just a very, very interesting piece of research that's being done about the workplace. So Colin and then Craig.
Yeah, just a quick one on what came up for me when you talked about culture making, and it's not happening now. The concern is that there's more acceptance that the culture is what it is now. Maybe it's being influenced by either and those at the top and or the funders, the people with the money. And so the bit that registered for me was, if we're going to culture making, it's got to be intentional.
Absolutely.
And that, I think, is where you're at with it's not being intentional anymore. We've stopped doing the things that you beautifully referred to in the training side of it and learning and apprenticeship and things like that. So, yeah, thank you.
Oh, brilliant. Thanks, Colin. Yeah, in the Peter Block's books, he talks about the need to start valuing, relating, learning, requests from each other, our intentions with each other, the gifts and attunements of working and being together. He said that needs to be valued because it's not valued anymore. Craig.
Yeah, thanks, Garry. Yeah, I recognise some of the model elements from corporate values, high-performing teams. I think there's elements of those that you'll see and are promoted. But I disagree that all this there's no space for this in organisations. I just completely disagree with that. I think it's actually down to leaders, elders, to create those spaces and have the skill to create those spaces. I think there's always space in organisations to create these things, and that's been my experience. So it's there, and people that do will go far, in my view, who can create those spaces where all of those things are present. So I think I don't feel there's a deficit here. I feel that the whole organisational learning and context and training has changed. There's much more onus on people to take ownership of their development rather than the company will develop you. But I think it's down to people to create those spaces in organisations, and I'm very positive about that. But I know some organisations they're on a more of a decline. But yeah, I feel more positive about the world, I suppose.
Great, thanks, Craig. Peter.
Hi. I think my view on culture is that at a very basic level, it's those behaviours that are accepted by the organisation. So it's not we'll treat people with respect and the notice that's on the notice board. It's actually how individuals are treated. And I think one of the challenges around what Gary's advocating is that there will be people in positions of influence, either organisationally or in what I would describe as the invisible organisation, who will not resonate with that quite consciousness, if we want to use that word, the consciousness of the person becoming fulfilled, because it's alien, because they're still very much in the controlled environment that a lot of people have gone through. In my experience, more people are becoming conscious, and I think they're becoming conscious because the world seems to be getting out of control and they want to take control back for themselves. But that's a difficult journey. So those would be sort of the initial points. One further point in terms of myself, I was looking at this, and I think it's a brilliant like that you were saying inside the organisation. I was more interested in how do people who were leaving the working environment come to terms with not having the working environment and that structure around them going forward. And I think that becomes more challenging, personal experience here, as you leave following being a senior executive, in my case, head of HR for a nuclear establishment, to suddenly you go from there to being a consultant, and there's a whole raft of changes in terms of how do I come to deal with that. And that it's taken me on a particular journey, a spiritual journey about what is my purpose as well. So just thought I'd share that.
Well, thank you, Peter. And thanks for sharing that. I feel quite moved by you sharing that with us, because I think this is the point of the eldership piece as well, is that there's this, we've been brought up to believe like almost like retirement is going to be the answer to so many issues that we face in the workplace, in a way, like, oh, well, once I get my retirement, once I draw my pension. And actually it's a well-known fact, and it's been researched, that actually the transition, that leaving an organization and leaving working life, is one of the hardest transitions you'll ever make in your life.
Yeah, definitely.
And actually there is nothing there, because everybody's going, well, what's your problem? Just kind of get on the golf course and play some golf.
Yeah. And there's no sort of what am I? Because I'm not my job.
Exactly.
Because my job doesn't exist anymore. What am I? And
Yeah.
that's a very big traumatic change on the back of the stuff that Gary's sort of saying. And I think that probably the East has got a better understanding of that.
Yeah. I know. So thank you for sharing that. And for me, that was part of kind of setting up the eldership space, was because in eldership, we're not on our own. We need community. So actually, a community, once we hit midlife, community is one of the most important things. We need to feel like we're part of something, and we're part of a structure, and we've got purpose, and we've got meaning, and we're being valued for who we are. Not necessarily the job we do.
No.
And that's why I set up the community, because it was so important to understand that eldership, we don't elder on our own, we elder in community. And we learn, and in a way, that's another learning journey that we go on in terms of being part of a community, because in our culture, we've created, if you like, a sense of, or an ideal of what community is in an organization. And people have often joined organizations thinking it's like a family, and it's like it isn't. It isn't a family. And this is where people can get very entangled in organizations, in their identity. because it's not a family, and your job is not who you are. You're absolutely right. So then that, oh, well, who am I without those things? So there's a bit of an identity crisis that goes on as we cross into that threshold.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Thanks for bringing that.
Mm.
Penelope.
Oh, thank you all. I want to sort of tie everything in terms of riffing off Craig, but also bringing in this community, because Garry, I had in the notice, like, I don't agree you don't have that embodied experience or, you know, your model in your organization, in your company, because I believe that you are creating, you know, change, and you are building that community of people that, you know, those engaged people that get you in your environment. And so I want to hear some examples of how you actually are living that on a day-to-day basis. Organization in the company.
Thank you, Penelope. Good to see you. The truth, the absolute truth. And by the way, I just want to acknowledge Craig. Love all of your thoughts, Colin, Craig, Peter. Really, really helpful. I've got really, really good notes here to reflect on myself. So thank you for that. Answer your question, Penelope. It's one of the biggest conflicts for me is, and if I actually just point back at what Craig shared, like I do actually really empathize with your challenge, Craig, because we've all got agency. There is the ability to self-organize. Is part of my answer to your question, Penelope, is so that this, I guess this is the point. Like we've all got abundance of power to do. Like no one's telling us not to do anything. Actually, generally, it's more a case of what does your system say to you when you actually do stuff without asking for permission. And I think that's the tension, and that's part of the answer to your question, Penelope, which is because I am so embodied within the organizational setting, and I'm very, very good at sales. My main job is sales and business development. So I'm in this very strange spot where, yes, I am. I appreciate your comment. I am absolutely embodied in line with what I'm showing, but the reciprocity isn't there within the system I'm part of. So, and the reason I stay in that system is because it's such a harmful system by design. If I can just reach one person by being embodied, maybe they will get inspired by that. We can start to have a different conversation internally about a supply chain that's really, really harmful all around the world. So, you know, I've got a quite clear reason as to my purpose and why I stay in this probably not healthy space for me, honestly, as Garry, generally. I'm struggling in some ways, to be honest with you, to stay in that system because I know that I've got value to add. I've tried to have the conversation within the system with leaders, etc., but continuously and persistently, you know, it's sort of no, we don't want to do that. It's all about making money. We have to hit the numbers. Everything else is secondary, and that comes from the power base. Now, I know my role in part. You're helping with this question. Is to try, and I'm guilty. This is actually one of my biggest challenges. And I think it comes back to saviorism again, Zena, is it's not actually about those senior leaders within my organization. It's about the 5,000 people that work at that organization that could all be switched on. And I haven't worked out yet, maybe how to try and elder within a business yet, how to elder community from the inside out. So maybe that's a provocation for all of us on the call. And for me, is what does that even look like? Like, how do you have an outside in, inside out eldership community? So I'm not sure really. I think you gave me more questions than answers as per usual, Penelope, but a lovely question. Thank you.
Thank you. So I just want to go to Claire, who said, my reflection, it seems to come down to answering the question, can I afford to be authentic, wholly embracing the model, societally, financially, emotionally? What if it falls on deaf ears in an organization that isn't ready to change? It feels like there is a collective knowing, but a fear at the same time. Is what I would gain greater than what I would lose, what I would gain? And I think this is it's a brilliant observation there, because I think it is a case of when we step into elder, when we step in to be embodied in our authentic self, then there is a risk that we're going to take, and that there is something that's going to be sacrificed. And the challenge is we don't know what that might be. So, and this is about kind of therefore then feeling that you know, how strong is that need in you? How strong is that longing in you to move forward and do to do what you feel like you're being called into doing, and then trusting, if you like, the universe in terms of where then that takes you. Sometimes we're not meant to be in the organization that we're in anymore. Sometimes we've outgrown a job, we've outgrown the organization, we've outgrown a relationship. And so that's the threshold cross that we stand on in our eldership. It's one of the things that we do. It's almost like we're starting to follow more of a soul journey rather than kind of an ego journey as well. So last word to Caroline. And then we'll...
God, last word, no pressure. I'm Caroline. I've not met anyone before. So I think just for context, I'm a trauma-informed therapist, a creative arts psychotherapist, and I've spent the past sort of 6 years actually working in the charity sector, trying to implement trauma-informed journeys and trauma-informed practice on a systemic level. And I'm really interested in how that model maps onto the embodied human model. Obviously, there's a lot of overlapping and integration, but I think this sense of can I afford to be authentic that Claire reflected on in the chat, I've noticed, and for me personally, and I think professionally, it all comes down to safety. Do I feel safe? Can I feel safe? Understanding that no, there is no such thing as a safe space, right? What's safe for me isn't safe for someone else, especially when it comes to trauma. But it's how do we integrate that sense of safety in order to become embodied, in order to follow our soul, follow the spiritual call, etc. And just another point that Peter made, the sense of this identity, kind of what is my identity if I'm not working? I think in the charity sector as well. Oh, have you lost me? Am I here? You've not lost me. Okay, I thought you said you'd lost me. Sorry. In the charity sector, there's very much the sense that you get a lot of your self-worth from being in a caring profession. And so the idea that when that organisation doesn't match the values that you have mapped onto it, and you get this sense of moral injury, a moral violation, that what you think you're inputting isn't being matched by the organisation, it is particularly prevalent at the moment, I think, and that comes on to the colonialism, the capitalism of funders. What are funders providing, and how does that, what are they asking for in terms of targets being met, bums on seats, and how does that integrate with this sense of safety and authenticity? Just no questions, just more wonderings.
I love that, Caroline, as well, because I think we have a view sometimes, don't we, of the charitable sector, third sector, and actually it's all integrated. Really, it's almost like we kind of go, well, that's the capitalist system, and then that's the charity. So it's like, nope, it sits all together within. Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's a really good question. And when we're looking at the eldering from a systemic point of view, we are looking at where does the money come from and what's attached to the money. So we do a lot of deep work around money to find out kind of systemically where is it driven from, who, and also looking at the charity itself and looking at the founders. So who founded it? Why was it founded? Sometimes these things are founded on guilt, and so therefore that's sitting there in the system. And it's almost like it's in the shadow side of the system, and we call it looking for the sharks in the system, because if you like, they're there waiting to almost like upend things, as to why things might not work out how we want them to. So we'd be looking for what are those sharks in the system, because it's almost like we've martyred the system as a charity in some shape or form. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's some brilliant questions here around, eldering in different organizational spaces, but knowing as well that the economic system is an all-pervasive system that we've had for a very long time, and it's all part of the same thing. It's all part of the same system. Yeah, even though we call them different systems. Brilliant. Well, we've had an amazing conversation today. Thank you so much for all your contributions. And yeah, I've loved every minute of it. It could always go on for much longer. So I'm going to draw it as a close there to make sure we all kind of get our lunch or get off to our next thing as well. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Garry, for being here with us and sharing your model and your view of the world with us. I really.
Thank you. And may I say thanks to everyone for such rich engagement. I've literally got 3 pages of notes of reflections, and I just want to say what an amazing generative community you're building as well. It's definitely something I want to be part of more often. We need this space. We definitely need this space. So thank you.
Lovely. Thanks, Garry. Take care, everyone. Bye.